I only need one.
Remain seated and come to order. Superior Court of California, the County of Butte is now in session. The Honorable Michael R. Deans, Judge presiding.
Are you ready, Lisa? The court is calling the matter of People versus Pacific Gas and Electric Company, Butte County Superior Court case number 20 CF 01422. Counsel, will you please state your appearances this morning?
Good morning, Your Honor. Brad Bryan, Munger, Tolton, Olson for PG&E. With me, Your Honor, is Mr. Bill Smith, board member and will be interim CEO effective July 1, and Mr. Aaron Johnson, who's Vice President of Wildfire Safety and Public Engagement.
Good morning, Your Honor. Nick Axelrod, Munger, Tolton, Olson on behalf of PG&E.
Mike Ramsey, Butte County District Attorney for the people.
Jennifer Dupre-Tokus, Butte County District Attorney's Office for the people.
Mark Knoll, Butte County DA's Office for the people.
Thank you, counsel. My understanding, Mr. Ramsey, is that first order of business this morning is to address the additional victim impact statements. And I understand we do have an individual here. Is that right? And then you wanted to read a statement. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
You may go forward.
At this time, the people would ask that Mr. Henko, Mike Henko, brother of victim Dennis Henko, be allowed to come forth and give his statement.
Mr. Hanko, go ahead and come up to the podium here. Okay. And when you get up here, if you could take off your mask so that we can hear you clearly, and then tell us your name and spell your last name, please.
Okay. Thank you for having me here.
Go ahead and take off your mask.
Oh. Ooh.
All
Yes,
right.
my name is Michael Hanko, Hanko.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hanko. Go ahead and tell me what you wanted to explain to the court.
Okay, I'm Dennis's older brother. We were friends ever since we were able to talk to each other and just, be there for each other. I'm a little older than him, so, it took a while where I could get rough with him and stuff. But him and I moved to Paradise. I had, I had some things ongoing. I had to leave a job. 26 years at overnight/UPS, and I was a mechanic, and I loved it. I mean, big toys, you get to get dirty and, play with them. But him and I decided to move to, well, he was out looking, he was casing the area, and Paradise struck him because, he was, we both loved the country. My dad had a place in Soulsbyville over by Twain Hart, and we would go up there repeatedly, and play in the snow and do things, fish. And so when he asked me, hey, do you want to go to Paradise? And I go, well, I don't even know where it is, and he goes, well, I looked at other places, and, he goes, this is the best location there. There's, if you're in there, there's more means of getting out. There's like 3 or 4 exits to leave the place, And I go, wow, he's really checked it out. So we found a mobile, and, we put up the money, cash. And I've owned houses before, but, with kids, and it's kind of hard to, I have an ex that she was a truck driver, and so I kind of raised my 2 boys. She came in periodically because she was on the road. 4'8" person, a little blonde lady climbing out of a truck, and people couldn't believe that. And she's driving it. You know, and I was surprised. Well, when I met her, you know, she was driving them, but it was just a local truck, what they call a bobtail, small thing. Well, she wanted to further it, and so happened when we were together. So I said, "Go, you know, fine, go. You need to find what you want to do, and I'll, you know, I'm connected with her in a way, anyways. You know, she drives trucks, I work on 'em. So we had that connection. Well, we moved up there, and well, I had a place in West Sac, and like I said, you know, juggling 2 kids and a job that you know, I was the only mechanic there, and trying to raise 2 boys, working graveyard, and then they would call me in, like, you know, late hours in the morning, early in the morning stuff. So this is kind of working on me. So, anyways, Dennis and I got together at that house, and I had to let it go. I mean, you know, it wasn't within my means. I was living, you know, outside of my means. So that was fine. I mean, you know, material stuff isn't important to me, you know. So we moved up there. We got a place. Had some animals. Dennis is an animal lover by heart. I mean, you know, like I have a sign that says, "The more people I meet, the more I love my animals." You know, and he was that way. He just, I mean, he was a Christian person. He would not kill a bug. You know, he would pick it up and put it outside. Like, you know, why does this thing have to be destroyed? You know, who am I to say that this thing needs to go? And I started picking up on that. Well, you know, he was struggling because he lost jobs, and he was, you know, he was ailing because he had pins in his neck from a prior job. So, you know, it was kind of like we were helping each other out. You know, he would comfort me, and I would comfort him. Well, you know, some family members, well, I think it's from being apart, you know, that age different, we had troubles, you know, living together. So in October, I had purchased another mobile. And so I allowed him, because I was part owner of it, he was going to pay me off. So I said, okay, you have this place, I'll have the other place, because he wanted to do things to it. And I said, I'm fine. You know, it's just a place to sleep, a place to have our animals, a place to eat. And I said, well, you know, I don't need that. I'll find another place and get on my own. And then we started having a better relationship because we were apart. We do our own thing. Well, here, not even a month in the place, you know, a fire starts. And I hear it's PG&E. And it's, you know, it's been going for a while. The fire's been going for some time. So on one hand, I feel this so-called crime isn't so, because they just file for bankruptcy, pay fines, money to people they have harmed, and then it's back to business. How can you put a price on a life? Not only the human, but the wildlife they have destroyed. Now, on the other hand, I worked for overnight in UPS for 28 years as a mechanic. If I was to let go of a broken piece of equipment down the road repetitively, I think I would have lost my job and maybe a lawsuit for negligence and served time behind bars. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how, you hear about, I mean, I've heard, trucking companies that they have scales. That's what the scales are for, is to make sure they're up to law. They fall in these guidelines that they're safe on the road. And you hear about these companies that are just functioning with dysfunctional equipment, And overnight, they had a lot of old equipment. And, I would take it upon myself to just, I took pride in it because, I mean, they got mad at me because I have so many things listed, Some of them weren't important, like, a ripped seat or something like that, some of it was cosmetic, but, I felt that, they need to invest in some equipment because, you can't have that stuff going down the highway, especially with more and more traffic out there. And, these Ford drivers, people think they're out there to slow down traffic, but they're not, Have you ever tried to drive a truck that you have to shift gears all the time? And, you have to, it's nice to keep it rolling instead of starting from the stop all the time. So you have these people, oh, this darn truck, I'm going to go around and hit my brakes because he's making me go slow. So these guys would come in and I would, I'd feel for them. Like, you're out there, how many hours driving? You have a person in a bunk, that's dependent on you to be safe. And they're coming off the road and they're angry. Oh, I need this fixed, And I say, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on? What happened out there? Oh, these people cut me off and this and that. I go, hey, go and relax, get some water and stuff, And then he'd come back and we could discuss it in a manner to where, and it was like, I have to take care of this person because he's driving my piece of equipment. So, I think there's still an ember smoldering and the fire has not been put out. I don't think the fire has been extinguished, but I hope today we are here to put it out. I am here on behalf of 3 sisters who have lost their baby brother. We don't get together as much as we used to for the fear that the mention of Janice will bring back the sad feelings. I will tell you, women don't forget who have hurt their family. Kathy, Terry, and Donna are very, very loving and caring. We lost both parents 20 years ago to cancer. How do you explain losing a family member to fire? I don't know where to start. Oh. Well, it's hard to come back to a place that has sad memories. I thought I was going to live my life out here in paradise. Now I don't want anything to do with it. I now reside in Twain Harte, which is a place that resembles paradise. No SF Giant games, camping, or reminiscing with him. Oh, I'm sorry, bro. Oh. Nothing upsets me more when money is more important than lives. Without people, money doesn't exist. I don't know why something can't be done. Like, they say they're gonna come in and put underground electrical. What's wrong with solar? I've understood that on our mobiles, we couldn't have solar panels. I don't know what for. But I think there's other solutions. I think that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hanko, for
Welcome.
making time to come up here today. I appreciate it.
Nice first name.
I know, I noticed yours as well. Mr. Ramsey?
This is a statement by Tammy Hillis, his daughter of T.K. Huff. She indicated that she was not able to make it today. She was intending to make it yesterday, or her sister, and the emotion, as we have seen in this courtroom, overwhelmed. But late last night, she wrote this statement. My name is Tammy Hillis, and my dad's name was T.K. Huff. I hastily wrote an impact statement that was riddled with mistakes and was all over the place with raw emotion. I would like to resubmit this letter on my dad's behalf since it was too hard for my sister to be there in person. This has been the worst nightmare imaginable. We will never be whole from this experience. To the many days of looking for our father and wondering if he made it out alive, only to give a DNA sample to identify his body. As Dad's last day on Earth started with an early morning phone call from my brother and sister pleading with him to leave because Concow was on fire, only to find it out later that he only made it to the garden hose at the end of his property. And the only way we knew that this happened was the red tape of a crime scene, still tied from his fence to the water pipe that watered his garden. Dad's last moments are hard to imagine. He had a water bucket near, and it's the only means of survival. We don't know if he burned alive or was made to suffer a prolonged death. Neighbor's house was untouched by fire. It was only 60 yards away from where Dad's wheelchair was found by us. We are left to picture his last heart-wrenching moments on Earth. Please explain to me why my father had to die this way. In the dirt of his garden, alone, afraid of what was coming down the hill. This was the flaming monster, destroying everything in its path. Our father died from the ultimate monster, PG&E. Their complacency year after year after year is pure evil. They knew and chose to do nothing, which makes them murderers. I had told a nurse that I'd hoped Dad was in his home so he could use his gun rather than burn alive. For a daughter to want her dad to die by killing himself rather than burning alive is sickening. PG&E is a disgusting example of greed, and I hope they all burn in hell. Because 85 souls had to burn alive in order for this soulless company to feed greed. This will never end for the families who have lost their loved ones, and no amount of money will ever be enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Are there any additional victim impact statements to be presented, Mr. Ramsey?
No.
We will now proceed with sentencing. Counsel, are we ready to proceed?
Ready for the people.
Ready for PG&E, Your Honor.
And Mr. Bryan, does your client waive formal arraignment for judgment and sentencing?
Yes, it does, Your Honor.
Is there any legal reason or cause why judgment and sentence cannot now be pronounced?
There is not.
As a housekeeping matter, the court has been provided with a binder that contained the statements provided to the court over the last day and into this morning from family members of the victims of the Camp Fire. Mr. Ramsey, is that to be marked as People's Exhibit 1?
We would ask the court to do so.
All right, the binder that's been provided to the court will be marked as People's Exhibit 1 and received into evidence. The court has listened to the statements of family members concerning their loved ones delivered in person yesterday before this court and through the district attorney. The court has also read and considered the additional written statements provided and incorporated into the binder marked as People's Exhibit 1. Furthermore, the court has reviewed the pleadings and documents in its file, including the plea and settlement agreement filed with the court on May 15th, 2020. Based on the agreement, Mr. Bryan, it's my understanding that your client does not object to the court imposing the maximum fines allowed by law as to all 85 charges, plus the investigative costs as outlined in the agreement. Is my understanding correct?
It is correct, Your Honor.
The court hereby incorporates the plea and settlement agreement advisements and terms as it relates to the imposition of sentence. The court will now hear from counsel. Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, in American history, there are several days of infamy, usually dealing with death and destruction. And those days become seared into the collective consciousness of a community. These are days that when you speak of them, they invoke immediate, unspeakable, unshakable, and unforgettable memories. You just give the date. December 7th, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor. November 22nd, 1962, the assassination of President Kennedy. September 11th, 2001, the 9/11 attacks. And then November 8, 2018, the Camp Fire, the worst and most destructive fire in California history. Over 153,000 acres of destruction. Over 18,800 structures destroyed, of which nearly 14,000 were residents, family homes, and an entire American city wiped from the face of the earth. Untold disruption and displacement of the lives of nearly 50,000 people followed in the wake of that fire. And of course, the death of the 84 souls that we have seen projected up on that wall as we've had these proceedings over the last few days. As the court's indicated, it's received our pleadings, the people's statement of factual basis, and the factual support, which is the factual support for PG&E's pleas of guilty, and the people's sentencing statement in support of the aggravated or maximum sentence. We don't intend at this point to go through that rather thick document. It speaks for itself. There's more than sufficient evidence in that detailed report, which is also now a public report up on the district attorney's website, that details PG&E's criminally reckless and grossly negligent behavior for the purpose of elevating profits over safety that led to the death of those 84 people. But I feel I should at least give some context, some background to the beginning of that day of infamy. It was during the early morning hours of Thursday, December 8th, a CAL FIRE captain in charge of the Jarbo Gap station up in the Feather River Canyon could hear the annual Jarbo winds began to howl as he got up before dawn and began to fix breakfast for his crew. Now, these winds, as indicated, are very well known locally. Every year, during about October and February, they come down the Feather River Canyon into the Sacramento Valley with zephyrs clocked between normally 30, 40 miles an hour, gusts easily up to 50 and sometimes 70 miles an hour. It is in that canyon that the PG&E has its stairway of power, a stairway of power that was originally built by the Great Western Power Company, a stairway of power that has a number of dams and powerhouses that take lines, power transmission lines from and send it down the canyon, down the Sacramento Valley, and into the Bay Area. As the captain began continuing to fix that breakfast, he thought he heard what was rain hitting the outside of the station. This seemed extraordinary to him, as there had been no appreciable rain for over 6 months. California was still in the throes of climate change and a significant drought year that had started in 2013. It was a condition that PG&E was very familiar with. It's so familiar that they had made some plans to even shut off power in areas of extreme wind. Unfortunately, for the people of Paradise and those folks, 115,000 volt transmission lines were not included in their plan to shut off. When the captain looked outside to see if it was rain or what, the wind took the door from his hand. And he discovered it wasn't rain that he was hearing, but pine needles from the surrounding forest that were being forcibly pelted on the roof, windows, and sides of that fire station. Meanwhile, up in the Feather River Canyon, past the enclave of Polga, and up on a ridge above the PG&E Poe Power Dam on the Feather River, the fate of tens of thousands of Butte County residents hung literally by a thread, a small metal thread, all that was left of an insulator suspension hook, known as a C hook, that held a string of insulator discs that in turn held below them the live 115,000 volt line. It was a hook that had hung and rotated back and forth in the canyon weather and winds since it had been installed 97 years ago, purchased at that time by 22 cents. A hook that had worn a groove in both itself and into the keyhole in which it was installed. A hook that had been moved at some unspecified time in the past from a worn hole to a newer keyhole, showing PG&E at some far distant time knew that metal on metal wear was a problem. It was a hook that was supposed to be 15/16 of an inch thick, but it had worn down to the point that only the barest thread of metal was still intact, holding the heavy insulator string attached to that live power line. A hook that finally gave up the ghost and broke before dawn, November 8th, 2018. Sent that live 115,000 volt line slamming down into the side of the steel structure of the transmission tower, which created an electrical arc estimated between 5,000 and 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, melting the aluminum line and the steel structure itself, sending molten metal down into the very, very dry brush and grass below. At this time, the captain had gone back inside, continued to fix the breakfast, but within a very few moments was interrupted by the station's dispatch radio as it went off, alerting him to the possible fire in the canyon. The CAL FIRE crew immediately rolled up the canyon, up Highway 70, past Polga, and upriver to the Poe Dam. Arriving above PG&E's Poe Dam just before sunrise, the captain and crew saw the beginnings of the conflagration under the PG&E high voltage power line on the ridgetop across the river from them. That sight sent a chill through the captain and crew because they could see the fire was already exploding to the south and west, riding the Jarbo winds. Winds that were so high at the time that the captain himself had a difficult time keeping his feet. The captain radioed his headquarters with urgency in his voice. His crew would never be able to get across the river and get in front of this fire. And in a prophetic understatement, he told his dispatchers, quote, "This has the potential of a major incident. Send everything." In less than an hour, the fire had torn through Polga and the mountain hamlet of Concow, reached the eastern outskirts of Paradise, throwing softball-sized embers ahead north into Magalia and over the town of Paradise into the Butte Creek Canyon on its west side. Paradise and its residents were hit from three sides by massive walls of fire. Chaos, confusion reigned. We've heard about that from the survivors here. Thousands of homes and businesses were lost in a matter of hours. A town of some 26,000 people was utterly destroyed, and the lives of some 50,000 people permanently and irrevocably changed for the worst. And the 84 souls lost in the most horrific way imaginable, burned to death. Court has indicated, listened, and we saw the court and the folks here from PG&E listening to the truly heartfelt and difficult personal testimony of the victims' next of kin. Many times you heard the survivors discuss their nightmare imaginings of their loved ones' last final moments. One of those survivors, however, whose statement I read, did not have the buffer of distance from that horror. Mr. Richard Heffron, who was the son of 68-year-old Matilda Heffron, the brother of 40-year-old Christina, and the uncle of 20-year-old Ishka Heffron. Mr. Heffron, as noted in his statement, heard the actual final moments of his loved ones. The three women were trapped by the campfire in their Norwood Drive home in Paradise. They called 911. Their call was recorded, as all 911 calls are. For 10 minutes, the CAL FIRE dispatcher on the other end desperately tried to suggest ways for them to get out of the home. You can hear the three women move about the house and discuss with the dispatcher that at every exit they were blocked by fire. The grandmother, mother, daughter could be heard on the tape becoming increasingly panicked. Their horrific end and screams are recorded forever on the 911 dispatch tape as they died in real time, as dispatcher helplessly listened. Their commingled remains were found later in the bathtub of their residence. I've had 40 years of prosecution. I can truly say I've not heard a more god-awful, terrible, disturbing tape recording. It is truly scarring to the psyche and the soul. It can never be unheard. Much of the prosecution team have heard that tape. It was played to Mr. William Johnson, Mr. Aaron Johnson, and the outgoing board during their last year's tour of Paradise, as ordered by the federal judge, William Alsep, the supervising judge over PG&E's San Bruno probation. Important to note, PG&E is already on probation, a convicted felon. The investigation showed that the level of negligence by the company was well beyond ordinary negligence. It was gross, it was reckless, it was criminal negligence, established by years, decades of deterioration of equipment in its high voltage towers. A culture of neglect, of inspections, of maintenance, fudging of records, training of personnel, obviously all to maximize profit, led to the failure of the sea hook on that day of infamy. A hook, and this is one of the hooks from up in the canyon, hangs insulator string below it, below the insulator string, the highly charged line. This particular hook was up in that canyon for many, many years. As the court can see, this hook, one that did not fail, has a groove in it, a groove that would have been expected to be seen by any reasonable utility that had been checking their equipment. This is what killed those folks. This is the broken hook. This is the hook that had a mere 1/16 to 2/16 of wire, or rather metal, left when it finally gave up and fell to the earth, and was the death of those folks in a community. It was the hook that took the lives, the hopes, the dreams, the health, the sanity, the wealth, the happiness of a community. But etched into the very soul of this community is a concern. What will happen next? Will this happen again? At this sentencing, we have the opportunity to look at the objectives of sentencing. This court's well aware of the rule of court 4.410. The purpose, objective of sentencing in California is to protect society by encouraging the defendant to lead a law-abiding life and deterring it from future offenses. This objective is difficult to achieve with multi-offender corporations. Even with the most heartfelt displays of remorse and repeated well-meaning promises to reform. But as many of our victims and victims next of kin have noted to this court, you can't put a corporation in prison to really demonstrate the consequences of its misbehavior. We can only punish it by penalizing it financially, which quite frankly, under the law is too little for the enormity of the criminal behavior, but it is a start. More than anything else today, by the historic nature of PG&E's pleas to the 84 homicide counts, we established something that might answer that question. What can we do to make it safe? I've talked to Mr. William Johnson. I've talked to Mr. William Smith. They appear to be both fine gentlemen. They appear to both have that burning desire to change that culture of PG&E, and I applaud them for that. To make their job to deliver power safely. But as noted by many of our victims that have been heard, they felt that since a corporation can only work through its employees and executives, why aren't those executives in jail? Why aren't the top dogs going to jail? Well, let me speak to this and outline why this prosecution and a strong sentence, as we expect from this court, will serve as a very clear warning to those in the positions of power to be motivated to change that culture of PG&E. Based on something as simple as looking at your driver's license application. Put a pin in that for a moment. During the course of the investigation, along with the grand jury, many witnesses from PG&E were interviewed and examined under oath. Many internal discussions by the prosecution team, both from the Butte County DA's office and the Attorney General's office, were had as to whether there was sufficient evidence under California law to indict any individual PG&E personnel or executive. It was finally determined, based on the current state of the law in California and the facts discovered in the investigation, that there was insufficient evidence to proceed against those individuals to seek an indictment that would withstand later beyond a reasonable doubt. Many of our victims, many of the public also feel that the executives, the top dog, the person in charge should be responsible in the law. They are in the civil law. In the concept most people know of respondent superior, Latin for let the master answer, in which the organization's top executives are held vicariously liable for the actions or omissions of their subordinates, regardless of the executive's personal participation or even knowledge. However, as we've indicated, this is a civil concept that does not apply in criminal matters. Leading California case in the area of corporate officer criminal liability is Seahorse Ranch versus Superior Court, 24 Calab 4th 446, which states an officer of a corporation is not criminally answerable for the act of a corporation in which he or she is not personally a participant. In the context of negligent homicide, such an officer would be said not to be liable unless he or she was personally aware of the omissions and other behavior that gives rise to the criminal negligence. Unless the decisions involving criminal liability of corporate officers either expressly or impliedly focus either on the officer's direct participation in illegal conduct or his or her knowledge and control of the illegal behavior. Mere fact that an officer's position at the apex of a corporate hierarchy does not automatically bestow criminal liability. We saw that in the evidence based upon the forensic analysis of the failed C-hook, then opinion of the experts consulted that the wear caused this hook to break occurred gradually over almost 100 years. It is our belief that that wear had been visible for at least 50 years. Over the past 50 years, of course, scores of PG&E employees would have been in a position to observe the wear. However, none of those employees documented that wear. Since no one apparently noticed the wear, it would have been impossible to prove any single person was negligent. Additionally, PG&E culture made decision-making by committee a standard, virtually eliminating individual responsibility. It was a silo mentality. Also pervaded the company, in which departments and management groups did not share information, goals, tools, priorities, or processes with each other. As an example, the tower division of PG&E took responsibility for the maintenance of steel tower structures. The PG&E line division took responsibility for the maintenance of power lines. The C-hooks seemed to fall between their two responsibilities. Therefore, neither took responsibility for the hooks, assuming the other division was responsible, which left these hooks as orphan equipment. Many of the decisions that ultimately led to the Camp Fire, made in 80s, even earlier, 90s, 2000s, it would have been almost impossible to prove a person making the decisions in, say, 1995 knew the decision was creating a risk of a catastrophic fire some 20 years later, and that they either disregarded or ignored that risk. But the corporation as an entity, a corporation as a fictional person, is tasked with that decade's worth of knowledge and reckless behavior, and was so indicted. But now, as a result of the investigation and the prosecution and the distribution of the report to the executives of PG&E, those folks are now tasked with the knowledge of their company's reckless behavior in failing to properly maintain their equipment. They are on notice. It is not unlike what Your Honor would remember and know. It's a Watson warning. That warning, as we circle back to the California driver's license, that every California driver, when they apply for their driver's license, is told, known in certain terms, that I understand that being under the influence of alcohol or drugs or both impairs my ability to safely operate a motor vehicle. I understand that it is extremely dangerous to human life to drive while under the influence of alcohol or drugs or both. I understand that if I continue to drive while under the influence of alcohol or drugs or both, and as a result of my driving, someone is killed, I can be charged with murder. Now, prosecutors throughout the state use this warning to supply the implied malice element of second-degree murder for repeat DUI offenders who, after multiple missed opportunities to kill someone, or in some instances killing someone, being charged with manslaughter, know and are warned, next time it's murder. We propose a new PG&E executive Watson warning. Should be, I understand, that being under the influence of greed or profit, or both, impairs my ability to safely operate an inherently dangerous business, such as delivering high energy power. I understand it is extremely dangerous to human life to operate such a utility while under the influence of such greed or profit, or both, to the detriment of proper maintenance. I understand if I continue to operate a utility under the influence of greed or profit, or both, and as a result of my failure to properly maintain my utility, and someone is killed, I can be charged with murder. Because now these executives fall within the exception noted in Seahorse Ranch. That person, executive, that is personally aware of the omissions or other behavior that gives rise to the criminal negligence is in danger of criminal liability. Knowledge is power. PG&E and its executives should, and I believe have, absorbed the knowledge of how its culture has led to a reckless behavior to cut corners, to maximize profit. And they need to reform, or they will reap the ill wind of a substantially personal prosecution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Mr. Bryan.
Your Honor, Mr. Smith will be addressing the court on behalf of PG&E.
Very well, thank you. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Honor. During the past 2 days, we've heard victims of the 2018 Camp Fire share their traumatic and tragic experiences. We've heard every word, from the ones in person, to the ones on the phone, to the ones read by Mr. Ramsey. We respect and honor each of those victims, what they've experienced and what they've shared with us at this hearing. We will never forget their pain. It can never be said too many times, we accept responsibility for our role in the Camp Fire, and all 23,000 employees are committed to making sure our equipment never again causes a catastrophe like this. On behalf of everyone at PG&E, I'm truly sorry for the terrible loss of life and the physical and emotional damage resulting from the fire. I recognize that no apology, no plea, no sentencing can undo that damage, and no passage of time can lessen the anguish that we heard expressed in this courtroom. All of us know that actions speak louder than words. We have taken action, and we will continue to take action to combat the growing threat of wildfires and to keep our customers and our communities safe. We have been working tirelessly to improve our processes, harden our systems, and incorporate advanced weather technology to give us better insight into what's happening in these risky conditions. Overall, we're making comprehensive and meaningful changes to make PG&E the safe and reliable utility that Northern and Central Californians deserve. We are committed fully to continuing that work. While nothing will repair the wounds caused by the Camp Fire, we hope that the actions we are taking will begin to restore trust of our communities and their confidence that we are working to keep them safe. Your Honor, we have come before this court, the Camp Fire victims and the community, with humility and respect. ready to be held to account for this tragedy, and committed to regaining the trust that we have broken. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Counsel, is the matter submitted?
It is, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
This matter is before the court as a result of a plea to the following offenses. Count 1, a violation of Penal Code Section 452, unlawfully causing a fire as a felony, plus the following enhancements as it relates to Count 1. That pursuant to Penal Code Section 452.1A2, a firefighter suffered great bodily harm. That pursuant to Penal Code Section 452.1A3, the defendant proximately caused great bodily injury to more than one victim. That pursuant to Penal Code Section 452.1A4, the defendant proximately caused multiple structures to burn. Counts 2 through 85 inclusive, the violation of Penal Code Section 192B, involuntary manslaughter as a felony. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and the admission of the enhancements, and it is the judgment of this court that the defendant is guilty of those offenses and that the enhancements are true. In thinking carefully about the sentence to impose in this case, the court is reminded of the recent statement of U.S. District Judge William Alsop. Quote, "If there was ever a corporation that deserved to go to prison, it's PG&E," close quote. This court is adopting that sentiment. If these crimes were attributed to an actual human person rather than a corporation, the anticipated sentence, based on the applicable statutes to which the defendant has pleaded guilty, would be 90 years to be served in state prison. Nevertheless, the court's sentencing options in this matter are limited. As a corporation, PG&E cannot be sentenced to prison, and they have declined to grant a probation. The only punishment that the court is authorized to impose in this situation is a fine. The court has considered the facts of this case, which establish a callous disregard for the safety and property of the citizens of Butte County. The court has also considered that the only means of exacting punishment for the many serious crimes to which PG&E has pleaded is to impose a fine. Accordingly, the sentence imposed will be the maximum fines authorized by law. Counsel have previously been provided with a fines and fees breakdown. Court will impose the following fines. A restitution fine pursuant to Penal Code Section 1202.4B, that is a per case fine in the amount of $10,000. As to count 1, Penal Code Section 452 violation, the court will impose a maximum base fine in the amount of $50,000 pursuant to Penal Code Section 456, plus the additional fines, fees, assessments, and surcharges listed in the fines and fees breakdown for a total fine as to count 1 to be $195,070. Counts 2 through 85 inclusive, a violation of Penal Code Section 192B. As to each of those 84 counts, the court will impose a maximum base fine in the amount of $10,000 pursuant to Penal Code Section 672, plus the additional fines, fees, assessments, and surcharges listed in the fines and fees breakdown for a total fine per count, that's counts 2 through 85, $39,070. The total amount of fines, fees, assessments, and surcharges are to be $3,486,950. That's $3,486,950. The fines and fees breakdown will be ordered appended to the court's minutes and filed in the court's file. The court will also impose, pursuant to the agreement of the parties, investigative costs in the amount of $500,000 payable to the Butte County District Attorney Environmental and Consumer Protection Trust Fund. The court will reserve jurisdiction as to restitution. Mr. Bryan, your client will be directed to contact Court Compliance Division in the Butte County Superior Court to establish a plan for payment of the fines. The court will set a hearing on the issue of restitution, and I'm suggesting that we set this out about 6 or 7 months, probably to set it into early to mid-January for the purpose of addressing restitution. I'm suggesting that we set that on a Friday in early to mid-January. We haven't talked about this, a date yet available, but I'm thinking Friday would be a special set date for this court. Does anyone happen to have a calendar there that goes into 2021?
Ms. Dupre-Tokus is checking on that right now.
That's January 2021.
We appears on Friday, January 1st may be off.
I'm
So-
thinking the doors will be closed.
All right.
The 8th or the 15th?
8th, 15th, 22nd.
Any preference, Mr. Bryan?
I don't really know, but I think I'd prefer the 15th, Your Honor.
And that works for the people, Mr. Ramsey?
That is fine.
All right, we'll set this matter then for a restitution hearing. That will be on Friday, January 15, 2021. That'll be, again, the special set calendar. It will be held before this court. That will also be held in the Oroville Courthouse. That's where my department is usually heard. And counsel, are there any other issues we need to address?
What time would that be, Your Honor?
Let's set that at 8:30. Actually, Mr. Bryan, because you will be coming out of the area, would you prefer to have that set at 1:30?
That would be better, Your Honor.
All right, we'll go ahead and set that at 1:30 in the afternoon on January 15, 2021. And counsel, are there any other issues we need to address?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Ramsey?
No, yeah.
Your Honor, I would like to thank the court for its patience, its consideration, its attention to this matter. I'd also like to thank Mr. Ramsey and his staff.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan.
Similarly, the defense counsel in this have been extremely gentlemen and professional all through the matter. And we thank them. And we thank them for their legal expertise in helping their client come to the realization that the evidence was such that the plea of guilty, the 85 times that we heard guilty, Your Honor, was most appropriate.
Counsel, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the court is now adjourned.